I'm Dr. Ryan DeBell from The Movement Fix. This is Movement Fix Monday. What I want to talk to you about in this video is how to modify the deadlift to make it pain-free. A lot of times deadlifts come up in a workout and someone goes, oh, I'm not going to do it because deadlifts bother my back. And while that may be true, there's certainly some modifications we can do and different ways we can set up a deadlift to try to make it pain-free so that we can do pain-free training. So now there's times, of course, when someone's back is so painful that there's no deadlift that's going to feel good. But that's usually not the case. And there's a lot of variations we can use to find one that feels good so they can actually keep training. I'm going to show the ones that use equipment that most people have. There's certainly other forms that you could use, like using a trap bar or a landmine, but most people may not have that, so I'm just going to show the ones that involve kettlebells, barbells, and dumbbells. So the first, of course, deadlift that we would be doing would be the conventional barbell deadlift. And if for whatever reason it doesn't feel good for you to do this, or you're working with someone and it doesn't feel good for them, there's ways that we can change the range of motion essentially required. So let's say, for example, someone's deadlifting and you're watching them from the side, and then they do the, they get a little bit of back rounding at the bottom, and that seems to be the thing that's bothering them. The first modification I could make is, what if I just go sumo stance? So if I go sumo deadlift, I'm going to go wide with my legs, and the way, now this is my height, this is going to change with everybody's height. I look for these lines here and put my feet essentially underneath those. And then go down, grab about shoulder width, and then see if you can deadlift pain-free there. Now the reason this can be helpful and pain-free for people is because if you were to measure the distance from the tips of my fingers to the ground, here where I'm standing in the symmetrical conventional deadlift stance, it's farther from the ground than if I go here. So essentially by widening my stance, I'm shortening the distance required for me to set up on the bar on the ground. So that's one option, is going sumo deadlift. I see people go hands together like this. I don't really like that. I'd rather go about this distance here. Now, if that's an issue or you don't like sumo deadlifts, there's another easy modification you can make. You can either stack up plates, as I have here, or if you have pull blocks are helpful, or if you have a rack, I'll show you that in a minute. But what I would do is stack plates up and then put the bar on the holes. And it only works so well depending on how many plates you have. That's why blocks are better. But essentially what I would do is elevate the bar to the height necessary so that the deadlifts are pain-free. So as you can see, whatever that is, an inch or so, that may be the distance where someone can pull with a neutral back versus that extra inch they lose it. So that can give us an opportunity to train the deadlift pain-free. Now if you have a rack like we have here, you could just do what's called a rack pull, essentially using the rack, and you have to have obviously this kind of rack where you have the bars here, and you can set the bars at different heights, and you want to go to the distance where it's pain-free. Just because deadlifts are prescribed or on the workout doesn't mean you have to do them off the ground in a painful range of motion. So again, nothing changes except obviously you're starting from a higher position, and then I would come down and reset each rep. So those are the barbell variations that you can use for modifying the deadlift. Now let me get this out of the way here. Now sometimes barbells just aren't the right choice, so you could do a kettlebell. Now kettlebell deadlift, you're going to have to do it sumo stance because it has to go between your legs. And the height of the kettlebell, depending on the weight of the kettlebell, may be higher than the starting position of a barbell. So you could just deadlift the kettlebell off the ground. Now, if that is still an issue, you take a plate and you just put the kettlebell on the plate or step or whatever you're using, the box, and then you just keep elevating it until you can do a deadlift pain-free from this height. Some people go to gyms that don't have kettlebells, so what do we do in that case? We just use a dumbbell, which I have over here, and I'd put it side or lengthwise like this, and then you just grab under here, two hands, and then you could deadlift here. Now again, if that's still too low, put it on a block, put it on a box, and then you can do it from this height. Now the last modification you could make, I forgot this when I was talking about the barbells, is you could just start a barbell deadlift off of a rack pole like this, or depending on how tall this is, you'd actually have to do this off the blocks, but you could start high like this and then work your Romanian deadlifts. If you have an issue with the beams, then do it off of plates or blocks. But that would be a way to start the Romanian deadlift, the RDL, without pain on that first pull. As you started on blocks, started out of a rack. And again, if you had a different kind of rig here, you could just start off the rack and walk out. So anyways, that is a variety of deadlift variations you can use so that if pulling a conventional style deadlift off the ground doesn't feel good to you, you have ways to continue training without pain. Now, a lot of athletes have the goal of deadlifting a barbell, standard size plates off the ground. So what I would do for those athletes is modify the deadlift in some way so it's pain-free, and then work on other drills that I've shown in many videos, straight leg raising, hamstring stuff, back stiffening drills as a side track. So you have that movement training on one side, and then you're still doing strength training, but in a pain-free way. So hopefully that gives you guys some different ideas on how to modify the deadlift for yourself or people you work with, and hopefully some of it's new. Anyways, if you don't already follow The Movement Fix on Instagram, you can find me at The Movement Fix. You can also follow me on Facebook at facebook.com/The Movement Fix. I'll see you guys next week.